Right. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the UK Cares advocacy training today. We're really excited that you're here today and you're motivated to advocate for a cause. My name's Stacey Stanifer. I'm an assistant professor in the College of Nursing, and I'm a co-leader of the Community Engagement Corps for the UK Center for Appalachian Research in Environmental Sciences. And I would like to take just a moment to capitalize on this opportunity to tell you a little bit about our center. The UK Center for Appalachian Research and Environmental Sciences is one of 28 environmental health sciences core centers in the US, and we are the only center focused on environmental health in Appalachia. We're funded through the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, which is a division of the NIH. And if you're not a member of our center, I would encourage you to check out the link below that Christian will also be placing in the chat. And you can learn more about our center, and I encourage you to consider becoming a member of our center as well. Our mission with UK Cares is to discover and translate research on how the environment affects the health of people in rural Appalachia. And one of the ways that we accomplish this mission is by engaging with Appalachian community leaders and residents, hearing their concerns and supporting environmental health research to improve public health and promote environmental justice. Today's advocacy training is one tool in our toolbox towards achieving environmental justice, and we're grateful that you're here. So while you may be here today with an idea of what you will be advocating for, I would like to briefly set the stage for why environmental health and environmental justice is important to our center. In the summer of 2020, UK Cares invited community organizations and community members in Southeast Kentucky to participate in an online community survey to gather community member concerns related to environmental health. These full reports can be found using the link on the screen that Christian will also place in the chat for us. So in particular, the UK Cares wanted to learn the concerns of community members in relation to health issues related to air, water, and emerging threats such as infectious disease and natural disasters. This report that you see here is kind of a snapshot of our findings from the folks in the Big Sandy area. We had 55 community members complete our survey, and you can see here there's a number of concerns that they have related to indoor and outdoor air, emerging threats, and water that all could potentially be addressed through policy change. You can see here, concerns related to outdoor air with truck exhaust. There's concerns related to PFAS in their tap water, concerns about integrity of municipal and public water lines. And the Big Sandy isn't alone in these concerns. Those in the Kentucky River Area Development District, we had 78 folks in the community complete this survey for us, and they also shared their concerns. Things that we know can be addressed through policy, like secondhand smoke exposure, as well as integrity of municipal public water lines, chemicals in their tap water, and pollution and dumping in their public waterways like streams and other water sources. And Cumberland Valley Area Development District shared similar concerns as well. So approximately 71% we had 98 folks complete the survey in that area development district, share concerns about secondhand smoke exposure and infectious disease. And they also shared concerns about dumping in their streams and other water sources. Again, if you'd like to see the full report for each of these area development districts, you can use the link that Christian placed in the chat. So what does this mean for you? The environment, we know, affects our health in many ways. And if you have concerns about your environment, you're not alone. Communities all across the US are experiencing devastation like never before as extreme weather and natural disasters become more frequent. And so what can you do? I think this is probably the question why many of you are here today. There's a number of ways to get involved. And over the course of the next 3 hours, Tiffany and Tom are going to impart upon us the many ways that we can be a part of creating positive change in our communities. So without further ado, today I'd like to introduce you to our facilitators. So you're going to be led through a wonderful interactive 3-hour advocacy training. By the end of today, our hope is that you will feel empowered to create change by educating and informing policymakers on what matters to you. Mrs. Tiffany Payette is a community organizer, activist, advocate, published poet, and visual artist based in Eastern Kentucky. She believes in storytelling as our greatest asset to connect and communicate, and in using arts and culture to build community power. She builds capacity within several organizations and collectives in Central Appalachia, with her organizational home being Kentuckians for the Commonwealth. Ms. Payette is a former fellow of programs such as KFTC's Kentucky Empower Leadership Cohort, Unified Democracy Fellowship, ACF's Capacity Builder Fellowship, and Colorado State's Mountain Centennials Fellowship. She's also a KEGAC Board Client Member and UK Care Stakeholder Advisory Board Member, a Kentucky Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee Member, and a member of the Waymakers Collective's elected Apple Corps. Mr. Tom Harris is the Vice President for University Relations at the University of Kentucky, a role in which he has served since 2002. The University Relations Group includes public relations and strategic communications, marketing and brand strategy, government relations, and WUKY Public Radio. In addition, Mr. Harris is currently acting as Vice President of Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement. Prior to leading university relations at UK, Mr. Harris worked in corporate communications for Honda of America, Toyota Motor Manufacturing, and Kentucky Utilities. A graduate of UK, Mr. Harris is a life member of UK Alumni Association and is active in the Lexington community, having participated in both Leadership Lexington and Leadership Kentucky, and is on the board of Commerce Lexington, Visit Lex, the Bluegrass Sports Commission, the Henry Clay Center for Sportsmanship, and Lexington Strides Ahead Economic Development Partnership. Thank you both for being here today as our facilitator. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Tiffany.
Thank you, Stacy. Let me pull up my slides for everyone.
They're coming. There we go. Okay, we see him now, Tiffany. Thank you. Oh, you're muted, however.
Is it good now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that, y'all. Appreciate you rolling with me. All right. So, thanks for being with me today for this advocacy training. I appreciate that this is where you've chosen to spend your day. And we'll just go ahead and get started. I want to begin with a land acknowledgement. Kentucky is the traditional homeland of many tribes. Those tribes have a past, present, and future relationship to this land. I am presenting from the territory of the sovereign Cherokee, Shawnee, and Yuchi nations. As you learn more about advocacy today, please hold an intention to make space for Indigenous voices within your advocacy. Wado, thank you. As we go through this together, please stay muted unless you are in a breakout and are speaking. If you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. We will definitely get around to them at the end. You can message Kara if you need any technical help. And just as a basic grounding in disability justice, which I believe in as an organizer, we want you to be good to yourselves during this process. We know it is a long period of time, So if you need to eat on camera, have a snack, go to the bathroom, lean against your arm, those are all okay things. There are lots of different ways to pay attention, and the important part is that you are present and engaging. Thank you. We want to ask that everyone be mindful of ourselves and each other. So one of our group agreements that I would like to suggest is to hold each other in what's called ethical space. And that is a, hold on, that is a concept coined by Elder Willie Ermine, and it refers to creating a space for knowledge systems to interact with mutual respect, kindness, and generosity, and other basic values and principles. And all knowledge systems are equal. No single system has more weight or legitimacy than another. So, what is advocacy? Sometimes we think we know what it is, but maybe we aren't 100% sure what it might entail. Advocacy is how we show public support or opposition to policy. It's also how we support others who do that. Policy can seem like it's a really intimidating thing sometimes, but policy just means the issues that we all live with and are directly impacted by. Policy is what takes care of those issues. So it's closely related to every one of us. Advocating for your community won't just empower you to speak to your experience or your knowledge, but it's an act of care for your community. And it can lead to real change. For a good example is Black lung advocacy. When community members that are affected by Black lung get together and go see their legislator and show them what their lives are like and how policy affects them, that can create really powerful change. We also want to acknowledge that faculty, staff, and government employees have certain limitations regarding policy participation, but they can educate and inform. So if you can't make an ask of your legislator, you can still provide education and information. And those are equally important tools. Sorry, my slide is taking a second. All right. So power mapping is something that I think is really helpful when we're thinking about what we want and how we get there. So what we'd like to do is think of some things that we want to achieve and who we work with to get that, and how much power those people hold. So sometimes it's going to be elected officials, sometimes it's going to be industry experts, sometimes it's going to be your friends and neighbors. And you may think that you only need to engage the most powerful people, but that's not necessarily true. Like you can see with those yellow dots all grouped together, that's what I would use as a representation of a coalition. So that might be a lot of individuals, but those individuals are big enough to move one of those larger dots by expressing the concerns that they have as that larger group. And one way that we move power is by messaging. We share the stories that are already existing in our communities and what we need them to hear. So if you have any things that you want to achieve, I'd love for people in the chat to start brainstorming some of those things, that what you want to achieve and who do you think is the first person that you would contact to get that ball rolling. And please don't be timid. Yeah. Yeah, those are all really good ones. And what kind of stories do we think would affect these outcomes? What kind of messages do we need the people in power to hear about those issues? Yeah. Love that. Okay, we're gonna move to the next slide, but I'm really glad that that's getting y'all thinking. That's the point of power mapping, is just to write out, what do we want and how do we get there, and who do we need? Who do we need to bring along with us? So now we're going to some advocacy tools. Some of them may seem super obvious, but some of them may not. And a lot of these are ways to approach the issues in our communities. Emails can be an email to your legislator. It can also be emails amongst your friends and your coalitions to make people aware of different research and information that's available. Petitions are one way we can use a small and quick action to show a large public interest. They do matter, and they do demonstrate that there is enough interest for legislators to pay attention to. You can call your legislative line. That's the number for the Kentucky legislative line. They're super easy, quick phone calls. You don't have to be a professional. You can just call and tell them which legislator you'd like to leave a message for, and mention the bill number if you have one. Another advocacy tool is to organize your community into a town hall. And if you can't lead one, you could supply the building, you could make food for it, you could document it. There are lots of different ways to support community action. You can have a working group, you can meet with a legislator yourself. And later on in this workshop, we will talk about the details of that. There's also media contact. You might want to be interviewed about your personal experience with an issue, or you might want to write an article. That's also something that we're going to talk about later. There are lots of different ways to engage in advocacy, and none of them are a bad choice. You could do all of them, you could do one of them. The point is just that there's an endless toolkit of ways to be involved and to not be a passive person with your the issues that impact you. So now we're going to look at a petition example, and the link is going to be dropped in the chat for everybody. This is about the Bernheim Forest. There is currently an pipeline that is being proposed to be put through it. And this petition is to urge for an environmental study on the proposed pipeline in an effort to save the forest. So if this issue speaks to you, it would be great to sign it. If it does not speak to you, you can feel free to wait until the next slide. But it is a good example of people coming together about something that's happening in Kentucky, where they are concerned about their health and the environment and what will happen. So when we talk about collective action, a lot of times people assume it has to be a giant, big effort. But sometimes just being able to show a legislator, hey, 10,000 some people all agree that we need to look at this. That is really powerful, and it gets them talking about it. Does anyone have any questions thus far?
Tiffany, do you have any examples? Any more examples you think of?
Of petitions that worked in the past, or of petitions for right now?
Oh, it could be either. Could be either.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of one petition that's going on right now that I think is really incredible, the amount of public support that's gone towards it, is the Indian Child Welfare Act petition to protect that act. The amount of public support for it has been just tremendous, and that does call a lot of attention to the issue and to the fact that it's even happening. I think without the petition shares and without that social element, a lot of people wouldn't know what the Indian Child Welfare Act is. And so that does put pressure on the people who have been considering pulling it. I think the Supreme Court has more to contend with when they look at, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people saying, actually, we don't agree. We don't think that you should pull the Indian Child Welfare Act. Yeah, I think that's a good example. I think, and a good example of petitions working also have been some of the ones related to Black lung advocacy. I think that a lot of those have made real differences in lawmaking in Kentucky.
Sounds like they can be a great tool to really lift up people's voices and have a rippling effect out and like you said, raise awareness. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks for that great question. All right, we are going to have our first 10-minute break now. And you can choose to stay and chill, or you can get up and stretch or head to the bathroom, whatever you need to do for the next 10 minutes. And then we'll be back. We're going to start coming back to the session. If you could throw a little thumbs up sign on Zoom, that would be cool. Let me know that you're back. Okay, great. Seems like most folks have come back. And if you're still trickling in, that's okay. All right, can we still see my slides? Everybody good?
Yes.
All right, cool. You can't see anything, Scott?
No, all I can see is a black screen.
I don't know why that would be. I'm able to see them in mine. Me too.
Black screen for me as well.
And this is Kara. It's black screen for me, but it may be a delay. If you want to stop and try to share again, that's fine too.
Sure, yeah. Glad that we checked and we have plenty of time, so. How's that?
There we go. Now I see it.
Yes, I see examples of advocacy at work is the slide.
Okay. Is it good for everybody?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you so much. All right. So there are lots of ways that we can talk about examples of advocacy. These are just a few of them. We obviously know that policy changes are a good result of citizen lobbying. If you've ever thought about wanting to go see your legislator, but you thought that that was scary or something, one thing that I like to tell people is that we put our legislators in office, we vote for them, and they are there to listen to us. That's the reason why there is the option to schedule a meeting time with them. So if you are a citizen who has a concern or something that matters to you, it's okay to let them know and have that conversation. And like I said, we will talk about how to do that and go through those little details later. Advocacy also increases public awareness. A lot of people don't know exactly what's happening in their community or that exactly they work for us. A lot of people don't know that an issue that's affecting them is also affecting other people around them. People tend to suffer in silence or, hold things pretty close to their chest. I think for me, growing up in a house that's right next to the road where all the coal trucks go by, and, the coal dust is in the air all the time, I think inside my house, we were always concerned about the effect on our health, but we weren't talking to other people about it. And when we see those like environmental studies and stuff, we realize actually a lot of the community is concerned about the same thing. And so that increase of public awareness empowers us to take actions, to advocate for our health, our well-being, our livelihoods, whatever is important to you, you need that public awareness. You need to feel like you're not alone in the struggle of expressing your own needs. It's really important that we uplift the voices and concerns of impacted people, and that we make solidarity with that. Solidarity is, really binding together different communities and different groups of people around the same issue. We may have some differing views on a lot of things, but many of us can come together around things like flood concerns. So it's so important that we find those points of solidarity. And we are a much stronger voice in expressing our concerns to industries, people in power, whatever the situation may call for. You're much stronger in forming a coalition. And that's an example of advocacy at work. For those of you who do research, those research results, if you share them with a community, that can demonstrate and back up what they're saying. So when they go to their utilities, when they go to their agencies or their governments, you have the data that can back up the things that they're saying. This is happening to me. I'm concerned about this. Backing that up with something concrete and scientific is such a beautiful and powerful thing, because the story is important, but the research, it really holds up and supports your community folks. So if you can't personally make asks of legislators, that doesn't mean that you're not a crucial part to advocacy. Does anybody have any examples of advocacy at work in their life? I would love to hear about them.
Being a survivor myself, several years ago, I had started the social media community that I called Stages. As I use examples of stages of cancer and the many stages that someone might go through while treating lung cancer specifically. So that's kind of where I came up with the name. And it's a Kentucky-based community, sharing resources, public resources, if you will, to kind of better educate on radon, which is big in Kentucky, and so on.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you, Scott.
That is great, Scott. I'd love to connect with you sometime and hear more about what you're doing. I have an example just with the project that we're doing, trying to make radon mitigation more affordable for everyone. Reaching out to housing organizations. So I think some people we hear a lot, like people have heard about radon, but they don't know a whole lot. And most people have never tested their home, but there is an environmental justice issue with folks who maybe rent their home or are low income and not being able to fix their home should they test high for radon. So I've been just trying to raise awareness initially about that, and going out and meeting with community organizations like Community Action Council of Kentucky and housing corporations, just to put it almost on their radar to begin thinking about radon as a health issue for the folks that they help in the community. And hopefully the end goal will be somewhere down the line, they'll be able to use some of the funding that they get to support these folks in having healthy indoor air.
Yes, I advocate, of course, with radon, as I mentioned, but also specifically for Kentucky is better education around lung cancer specifically.
Yeah.
Because I think we can we can do better. And I sit on several different committees advocating for that information.
That's great. During another
That was
example during
wonderful.
Yeah, another example, I guess, during COVID with everybody being indoors more, and of course, my mind thinking of us being home and the exposure to radon, wrote a op-ed for a newspaper to pick up to try to encourage testing too. So that was another example of mainly educating the public and trying to get them aware.
Tiffany, I can give you a couple of examples. Before I started working at the university, I was at the Clark County Health Department. And one of the things we worked on for years was a smoke-free policy in that community. And it took so much information and advocacy and public presentations and surveys with policymakers and more presentations and open forums and surveys such as indoor air quality testing and public opinion polls. So that was using a whole lot of different tools to try to achieve a goal. The other thing we did in Clark County was get a walking trail that didn't exist before. And it was a different process. It wasn't quite as contentious as smoke-free, but there was still so many steps. We had to go in front of planning and zoning and just trying to get the people around that lived around that path to not be afraid. So there was a lot of education and informing on both of those projects.
Yeah, those are great examples. Would anyone else like to share?
Well, I can share a little bit about a not-for-profit that I work with called Trees Lexington. And they work closely with the city of Lexington for increasing the tree canopy. And a part of that with this not-for-profit for Trees Lexington is working with other like-minded community organizations that have, cross similar missions, sometimes parallel, sometimes very similar, in promoting and educating folks about the benefits of trees, all the incredible health benefits of trees, whether it's providing more shade, cleaning the air, helping us with storm events when you get, water runoff and stuff like that. So we work a lot with the schools. We work with UK, with different organizations. So the education piece is huge because a lot of folks just don't understand how important trees are. They give us oxygen and pull in CO2. So yeah, it's really important work, the advocacy piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to highlight that sometimes advocacy tools can be very unconventional things as well. I know in my time with KFC, we've done events where we employed like music and art to draw people to awareness about an issue. So there are so many different ways to plug in. I did art and poetry to draw attention to a piece of legislation that I had concerns about in the event, and those things, they do draw the attention of people and get people engaged. So there are so different ways. Everyone has a unique approach and has something to say, and you shouldn't feel like if you are uncomfortable with some of the more policy related things, that there aren't lots and lots of options to engage in advocacy. But yeah, those were really great examples. All right. We are moving on to another slide. If my internet will. All right, so we are going to look up and write our legislators now. And you might want to take a second to kind of brainstorm about one of those things that maybe you talked about earlier that you're thinking about, that you want for your community, some of those goals. And then go to the link we'll drop in the chat. And all you have to do is enter your address at that link, and then it'll put a little pin where that is, and you'll click it, and it will show you your legislators. And then you'll just go view bio page, and there will be an option that says hit, it'll say the email, your legislator's name, and you can go ahead and send them an email. If there is a bill number of something currently happening, make sure to mention that. If there's not, if you're just expressing that you have a concern about a specific topic, you could just say what your concern is. But the important part is that we learn how to use this tool so that when you need it, it is in your arsenal. And, it's a really quick way to let your legislator know how you're feeling in relation to the pieces of legislation that are coming up. If you personally can't make an ask, you can also show your friends and family how to use this tool so that they can get more comfortable with engaging with their legislators as well.
Tiffany, I have a question.
And I am happy.
I have a question about this tool, but it's not really. So if you live in Lexington, Louisville, one of these, urban areas, it's always tricky, I think, to find, because Lexington has, I don't know how many representatives and senators. So, because I just put can you talk a little bit about that? How to find your actual, do you have to put your address in there, I guess, but then what?
Yes.
Yeah.
When you put your address in, and there'll be like a little balloon looking pin where that is. Do y'all see it? And then you just click that, and then when you scroll up, it should have your exact legislators for your district. Yeah. But that is a good question, because we have a lot of lawmakers, and it's sometimes hard to know who has what in their wheelhouse, Yeah.
You know,
I
if
write my legislators often. Yeah.
if Tiffany, if we were unsure whether there was a bill out there or not, along the top of this website it says bills. Do we just follow that and go to the current session to look for something,
Yeah,
or do you have some other
that
guidance?
is. Yeah, that is a good way to do it. It's also helpful to follow organizations that work on legislative issues, like Kentuckians for the Commonwealth does a bill tracker every year. It's very helpful if you just want to focus on issues related to education. You can, filter it by that, and those issues it'll show which bills are coming up related to that. been super helpful for me.
I actually sit on, or was asked to sit on the Capitol's Lung Cancer Screening Advisory Committee.
Yeah.
So we're moving forward with that, of course, and finding better solutions through research or better answers to how we can address moving forward.
Thanks for serving on that, Scott.
Absolutely. And I can give an example of the most recent time I've written my legislator. I received a grant from the Kentucky Arts Council, and so I had to write my legislators from my districts to let them know that I was the recipient and to ask them for supports for the arts to continue and to thank them for that. So sometimes it's just an issue specific thing. It's not a, you don't always have to have a bill number. You can just be expressing what's important to you or what's important to your community so that they know. It's really important that you say whether or not you're a constituent. So if you are writing someone from your district, they want to know that you're one of theirs and that you are a potential voter for them. It will earmark you a little bit as more important.
Do most of the legislatures typically write you back, or what's your experience been with that? Respond back?
Very frequently they do respond. And it's hard to tell sometimes whether or not it's their staff or them actually responding. But in some cases, they do, have like a very personal response. And especially if it's in response to something that is really regionally related. I know I've written Hal Rogers before about a regional issue and have gotten a very personalized response. Because he does have a lot of ties to the region. And so sometimes if you can find a common ground with the legislator, when you're expressing your concern, they will specifically address that. Whether or not they'll carry it over into voting, it's hard to say. But one way to get your letter more likely to be responded to is if you will ask for a response. Don't be afraid to ask. You can say, I would thank you for your time. I would really appreciate a response on this matter. And you're much more likely to get a response. Usually again, in email. Yeah.
Do you think that taking the time to writing a letter is more effective than picking up the phone and calling?
I think if you have a lot to say, if you have a personal story, it is helpful to have that in print so that they can go over and they have time. But if you just have a quick moment and you're all right with the message being carried on, it's perfectly fine to just use the legislative line. Those phone calls do matter, and they do in some ways disrupt their day in a good way, because it does catch their attention when they're getting a lot of phone calls on a topic. They go, oh man, that really must matter to District 3. So definitely don't count those out.
Right. That was my understanding too. Like, there's like a typical amount of calls they might get over a certain issue, but if it really spikes, and they tabulate, they do keep track, but if it really spikes, that they're a lot more likely to pay attention to that.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't tend to respond to phone calls, but that doesn't mean that they don't matter, or that they're not counted for sure. But emails will occasionally get responded to, especially if you request it. Your most likely interaction with a legislator is going to be having a meeting with them. But any way that you can contact them and let them know what's important to you is a valid and good choice, for sure.
I know that many of y'all might be familiar with the Go-To Foundation for lung cancer. They have a summit coming up in, I believe, March in Washington, that they are having people or survivors sign up for, survivors, patients, to advocate for just such. And I believe that's on their website. Let's see. I know it's on their social media.
We have some lobby days coming up quite a bit in February. And I know one of them was related, I think.
Yeah,
Cool.
there's the link.
Thank you for that link.
Thanks for sharing.
Those are great opportunities. All right. Kara, are we ready for breakouts?
We are. I'm going to go ahead and do that. I won't be in one, but you guys will all be randomly paired up. And if you give me just a second.
Yeah.
And I will also, you'll receive reminders too, so.
Yeah. So what I'd like you to do in these breakouts is you'll be with one other person, and I'd like you to brainstorm about what kind of thing you'd like to write an article, perhaps for your local newspaper about, and just talk about like what your personal connection is to that issue. Think about why your narrative is so important. Just kind of chat it out. Do 10 minutes per person, and then discuss together. I'd like you to encourage each other and highlight what you loved in each other's stories, and tell each other what resonated with you. Where do you think that story would be most impactful? Just give yourself time to brainstorm and engage with another person about what you'd like to say. Because I guarantee we all have a really good article inside of us.
Okay, I think we're ready. So I will open all the rooms and then send reminders as we get close to the finish time.
Awesome. Thank you, Kara.
You're welcome.
Anybody want to share out something that they learned in their breakouts? Anything that was cool? You don't have to. It's just an option.
I thought it was interesting that you get about 15 minutes with your legislature, whether it's federal or state. Does that seem to be about the amount of time, Tiffany? Yeah.
Yeah, it's never longer, unless occasionally they will, if you get a staffer at the end of the day, usually, sometimes they'll get wrapped up in the stories and they'll keep asking questions. One time I did end up with a staffer for like 35 minutes because she was really invested in hearing from the constituents. And that's what I mean by don't count those staffers out, you know. every now and then they will pick up on what they're hearing and give you extra time, but you should never plan to have more than 15 minutes and don't limit your practice, your speech of what you're going to say, and time yourself and see if it lands in the 3 to 5 minute range, because you're going to want to keep it brief.
That's our elevator speech, right, Ellen? Is that what I remember from course? So, but there were 3 specific things that you kind of suggested you touch on in that elevator speech, if I recall.
Yeah, the head, the heart, and the cost, your pocketbook, your wallet.
Yeah.
I don't think you know that one, Tiffany, but if you're trying to get right to the point, you have I always start with my heart. Like, why do I care about this issue? What's happened to me? I'm a lung cancer survivor, and this. So heart, head is stats, like just, what do we know about this? Over 1,000 people every year in Kentucky get radon-induced lung cancer, like a stat, not tons of them, just one. So it's heart, head, wallet. How much does it cost? So, lung cancer really costs for every case. It's about $1 billion a year or something. I don't know. I just made that up. Maybe it's 1 million. Anyway, the point is money, because, that's what legislators care about. No, well, they care about more stuff than that, but, they care about that. So Tiffany, I'd love your thoughts about that. That's what I teach. It's kind of an analogy that I teach in health policy.
I think that's really good. And those are, I would always encourage folks to lead with their heart, but also it does definitely help to have, a backup stat at some point. Like if you're lobbying with a group, I like to have one person remind them of the statistic that backs up everyone's experiences. And you do want to know something about the money, something about the budget, because they will ask. That is usually part of the questions that legislators ask towards the end. They're like, okay, well, how does this affect the budgets? And I love advocating for a piece of legislation that doesn't have a budget ask, but it's just straight policy. Because when they ask, well, how much is it going to cost? I can say, oh, you can do this without any cost transfer. Then they're like, oh, suddenly it's much more attractive. So yeah, I think that's always helpful. And, local legislators especially are going to want to hear how it's going to save, people money, because that makes them more popular. So yeah, great trifecta of tips. Awesome.
Yeah, I like that.
So does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I like that heart, head, and wallet. I think that's what's given me so much experience and compassion through bedside, where I've been, where I was in there for so long. And I'm full of analogies to where, my reference to the pier, if you will, in regards to stages, that will always be my header. And I actually took that picture myself. If anyone has ever heard of, I have vacationed for decades at a little island in South Carolina called Polly's Island, if anyone's ever heard it. It's probably, I think, like 2.5 miles long and about, at its widest point, 3 houses deep. No grocery stores, no nothing on the island, just houses and B&Bs. But they have this pier, and that's kind of been the staple of our stages community.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing about that, Scott. Does anyone have any questions now that we're nearing the end about advocacy, things that came up for you, things that you've been thinking? Man, I wish we had talked about XYZ thing. Would love to just hear from y'all.
I was just wondering, Tiffany, because you've done so much of this, like what has surprised you the most about doing advocacy work?
Good and interesting question.
It could be multiple things. I was just curious.
I think what surprised me the most is that, yeah, there are a couple of things. So one thing that's surprising is that your legislators are much less intimidating than you're going to think they're going to be. Being in a room with them it's not that hard. It's not that weird. Even if they have the most ostentatious office, they are just a person. And at the end of the day, what you have to say is super important. And they have to listen to you because you put them there. So I think it's super surprising to realize, like, oh, these people who make all of this important policy that affects everything about my life are just people, you know, and they're people that you can relate to sometimes, people that you can't other times, but they are just people, and it's easier to reach them sometimes than you would expect. Another thing that is surprising is how much community you build when you go on a lobby day with other people. Because you can come from very different walks of life, but if you're coming together on one issue and you're supporting each other in that room and telling your personal stories and discussing what really matters at the heart of the issue, and kind of speaking truth to power, there's something really, really solidifying about that. And you can honestly meet someone and be lifelong friends afterwards because you've had that experience of saying, like, man, this matters to me too. And we're going to go in there and we're just going to rock it, you know? And you do rock it together. You tell your story, you pass it off to the next person, you back them up if they get nervous, like, you've got them, you've got a fact about the issue. Those solidarity moments are surprising because you think you're going to go and you might be like, man, I don't know anybody at this lobby day. I've never done this. Could be weird, but it's not weird. And those are people who are in a similar spot and are eager to back you up. Like, it's a built-in camaraderie that you'll have.
I can tell just by what you said, like the energy that you get from that, right, is it's phenomenal. Yeah, that sense of community and support, and you're all pushing for this common goal, right? Yeah, it's good stuff.
I might add to that the other part of that is because advocacy is so hard, and it is, and if you don't have a win, and you get discouraged, if you have that camaraderie around you, you also get the support when things don't go well. And you can also strategize about what you might do next if it didn't work.
That's a great point. And an energy that I like to use about advocacy is, sorry.
Scott, were you going to share something?
Oh, I was just going to say that. I agree with Tiffany. I mean, it can be very intimidating at first. I've met the governor twice, along with several others. And you know, just remember they're just people, and you know, just don't lose, you know, stay focused, I guess, if you will. You know, they're just like each one of us, just like, you know, Tiffany was saying.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And the analogy I was gonna share is that it's kind of like splitting stone. Advocacy is. You may be like hitting the stone over and over, and you may not see the end result. But at some point, somebody's going to hit the stone, and it's going to split, and it's going to split because of all of the people who came before to hit it. So we may not see those like immediate results with advocacy, but every time that an action is taken, that's making it easier for at some point those results to happen.
That's a really good analogy. I've never heard that particular analogy before, but there's so many things that take so very long. And to realize what had come before in all that work, that's great.
I just want to point out to everybody that's on the call today, we did put a link to an evaluation for today's training. If you guys, before we're done today, if you wouldn't care to grab that link and fill that out for us, we would really appreciate your feedback on today's training. There were a couple of slides left, Tiffany, I think, that have the upcoming lobbying days. Do you want me to share those, or have you used those with your group earlier? Share them. You might have to tell me, or tell me how to actually. This is, well, can I make it bigger? No, I'm not in presentation mode. I'm not sure how to change it. If anybody wants to give me some advice, but Tiffany's been kind enough to kind of find some upcoming days that are going to be held in February during the Kentucky General Assembly. So you can kind of see on February 14th, We Love Voting Rights Rally and Lobby Day, organized by KFTC and the Kentucky Voting Rights Coalition. On the 15th, there's the Fairness Rally and Lobby Day, organized by the Kentucky Fairness Campaign. On February 16th, there's Kentucky Advocacy Day that's organized by the American Lung Association. And I know the American Cancer Society will also be there that day. So it's kind of a joint for them if that's something that interests you. I will be there, so I'll see you there in person. And then on the 21st, Have a Heart for Housing Lobbying Day, sponsored by the Housing and Homeless Coalition of Kentucky. And we will be sharing these slides with y'all after the session. So where she has the RSVP here, you'll be able to click on those links and take you right to the RSVP. And that helps the organization with planning if you do that ahead of time. Yeah. And tips for meeting with your legislator. If you do go beforehand, or if you do register, that'll really help, and they can help schedule those meetings. But you can also take some individual steps, and you can email or call your legislator's office and request a meeting. As she mentioned earlier, there's a shorter bit of time that you'll have available with them, but you'll want to be prepared. So use these tips that Tiffany is and has shared with us today to prepare yourself. I think, as we discussed a minute ago, having that heart, the head, and the wallet is a good way to go about preparing your message, and dress well and look professional when you're there as well. Keep things brief because your time with them is short, and let them know you're a constituent. So you're someone that does vote for them to be in or out of office. So that's important, and they need to know that your voice does matter, and they really take that into consideration. And as she points out here too, following up with your legislators after you meet with them and thanking them for their time is also a really great way to kind of come full circle, I guess, with your meeting with them. I don't know if anyone else has anything they'd like to tips they'd like to share about meeting with your legislators.
I find that using kind of a personal approach, if I walk in a legislator's office and I kind of immediately scan their office to kind of see what's on the walls, or, can I relate to anything I'm seeing? Like, they went to the same university I went to and their diplomas on there, I look for something I can relate to about what they do, if possible. And so I think that's always good, because then it just puts you at ease too. Like, I'm just a person, they're just a person. Like, maybe that's something I can relate to them. Oh, I know so-and-so that went to this university, or something. I don't know. But again, it has to be genuine. I mean, you can't kind of force it, but yeah.
So what, if any, questions do you all still have for us? Or for Tiffany? Anything we haven't touched upon that you'd love to, maybe an example or something you'd love to have some more information?
I hope they have Burke or Spalding's donuts. I'm just kidding. I just wanted to throw a joke at them. I'm kidding.
I haven't had Spalding's donuts in years. They're so good. Okay. So at the end, we would like for you, if you would, just put one word in the chat about how you feel about participating in and supporting advocacy after our time today. So take a moment to think about it. What is one word that you'd like to share with us? Excited, inspired. I was going to say inspired as well, Alyssa. Passion. Hopeful. These are all great. Yeah, inspired.
Spreading hope through fellowship.
Yes. Authenticity. I mean, to me, I think the takeaway that all of these together, Tiffany, you've done a wonderful job of just inspiring us, and any fears we might have had about talking to folks beforehand, you've made us feel empowered that we have the ability, we have what it takes to be able to reach out and make change. So thank you. Connected, yeah. Thank you. This is Miss Tiffany. Her contact information, she's shared with us her email address. And again, we'll share these slides with you all today, so you'll be able to refer back to them, and you can pull the links from those slides as you need them. Yeah. All right. Any parting thoughts from anyone as we wrap up today? I want to thank you all for your time. It's been a wonderful 3 hours. And if you do, we would really appreciate completing the evaluation that is in the chat. Thank you all. Take care of one another.